I will get going.
Diane, I think we're recording already. We
Oh,
should be good.
oh, good. Oh, okay, awesome. I don't know how that one came in, but that's perfect. Um, so thank you all so much for joining us today. I am just very excited about today's session. I had the privilege of hearing Arch Mohan speak at Ginger Leadership Communications 2023 Game Changers Summit in London. Her powerful presentation left a lasting impression on me, and I have been excitedly following her on LinkedIn. She currently serves as the Chief Operations and Technology Officer at Meridiem Investment Management in London. When I learned that she had written a book, I immediately ordered a copy, and I'm so grateful that I did. The through line, How Understanding Who You Are Empowers How You Lead, is a must read and has earned a permanent place on the top shelf of my leadership library. So definitely, I'll have information about it in our follow up email. Moderating today's session is Carlinde Kallianiotis, CEO of Ginger's Leadership Communications US. A Quorum member, Carlinde is a visionary leader, change maker, and coach. She's a powerful advocate for courageously raising the voices of women. I'm grateful and excited to welcome Arch and Carlinde today for a powerful conversation on finding your through line, purpose-driven leadership in uncertain times. So, Carlinda, I'm going to hand it over to you, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Diane, for this wonderful introduction. Now, I want to start by asking if you give virtual signatures, Arch. Is that a thing? Like, are we here at a book signing? uh,
I wish I haven't figured out a way to do that yet. I need to work on that, clearly.
it's a real pleasure to have this conversation with you, and also for everyone here. If you have questions for her, please put them in the chat or raise your hand, because I have some questions and some things that I really want to know about Arch and the whole process around writing the book. But if you have any, I invite you to do the same. So my first question, Arch, and I know we didn't rehearse, we wanted to keep it very kind of spontaneous and conversational, but I'm very curious about what inspired you to even start writing this book. Like, what was that process like, and what inspired you to do it?
Um, Thanks, Carlinda, and thank you, Diane, for such a generous introduction. It's a real honor to be here, and I'm so glad to be amongst friends. Um, I've always known I wanted to write some of the learnings that I've had as I've navigated this sort of journey through work down. And in 2020, when I stepped up as COO, a lot changed in life, both the role, but also life changed with the pandemic and lockdowns and trying to educate my daughter at home while maintaining a full-time job and taking care of our team and doing all of the things that as humans we needed to do in that uncertain time. And it sort of served as the springboard for the beginnings of the book. I thought I knew what I wanted to write about when I started. I had a clear, I've always been someone who doesn't like uncertainty. I like order, structure, an outline, and I stick to the outline. I stick to the script. And actually, this book is born of not sticking to any script. It's sort of become something completely different to what I expected it would be. Um, and yeah, it's been a bit of an adventure and a bit of a journey ever since. And it feels somewhat surreal to have this thing out in the world. I'm never quite sure what people will take from it or resonate with or not resonate with, but I'm so curious to hear what people have to say when they read it.
Great. Yes. For me, I just read it, and I think it's a mix of like a life journey that you're taking us on with a lot of stories. Also, this thread of leadership, like how have you navigated leadership and become the leader you are? But then also this element of reflection, right? Of like reading the book and you're asking questions about us, for about ourselves, and yeah, how we see things, and what our through line is, for example. So maybe you can share a little bit about this concept of through line, like what is it in general, and also what is it for you?
Sure. So the through line at its core is just the link between who we are and how we lead. And by leading, I mean how we show up. So just to be really clear, leadership for me is not a title. It is not bestowed upon us by some unknown force or some external metric. It is just the influence that we have in our environment and on our environment, whether that's in our family, in our friendship circles, in our workplaces. And it doesn't require permission. You do it already, whether you realize it or not. The question is, are you intentional about how you do that thing? And the idea behind this concept of the through line was that if we what I was trying to test was, if we understand who we are, can we better and more intentionally show up as that version of ourselves in the places in which we lead? And I don't know that it's a question I had ever asked myself concretely before this point, but in so doing, I feel it has given me permission to lead in a way that's true to who I am. And that is what I hope every single one of us can do, really, in life, because it gives us the gift of meaning, I think, when we do that.
Yeah, that's really beautiful way, and I would say that really came through also in the book for me reading it. I can see when writing a book, and this is, I've never written a book, so please share with
You
us
should try.
the process. Yeah, I can see that you said like you want to have order, you want to have structure, you want to have a script even before you start or while you're in the process. Like how was it for you not to have it, and how actually looking back are you like, yeah, how was that process not to follow this kind of more strict structure?
So it's really interesting. I've learned, I'm sure there's so much more to learn, but I've learned an incredible amount about the world of publishing, editing, proofreading, generating content. And it's ironic that the world of publishing asks you, for example, for a book proposal. And what is a book proposal? A book proposal is basically an outline of what you're going to say, how you're going to say it, and the point of what you're trying to communicate, right? So in essence, the process forces you to create structure. But I found that it was in that tension between structure and creativity that something new emerged. So it's not that I didn't, let's call it, stick to the script in broad brushstrokes, but I meandered a little bit along the way to get to a really fine-tuned point. And it felt really scary because my experience was that writing a book is like laying your soul out for the world to see, in a sense, especially when it's linked to personal stories. It wasn't just a pure nonfiction. Well, it is nonfiction, but it wasn't just a pure research-based book. It was linked to my own experiences in navigating the world of work. So that felt quite personal. And inherently, that wasn't something I had ever done before in this fashion. And so that felt scary. So that combined with deviating from a very formulaic script added to the complexity of it. So to answer your question, it was a very emotional journey. I submitted the book for final review in July of 2024, and it wasn't published until April of 2025. So there's this really weird period where you're just waiting. And I was thinking, oh God. And the closer it got, the more scary it got. Anyway, now it's done.
And
It's like
you
jumping
did
off
it.
a dynamite. Yeah, I did
Yeah.
it.
And you're sharing around the things you've learned around like editing and kind of more the processes. But if there's one thing about yourself that you've learned in this process, what will you share with us?
I think that I've learned that I am, as I said before, I am wedded to certainty. I love order, structure. Like a silly example is cleaning is my therapy. Like if I clean a room, I feel better after I do it. I don't know what it is, if it's Mr. Clean in the environment or just being certain that everything's in its right place. And this process taught me that actually messy is good. Messy is where it's at. Messy is where the learning happens. It's where you're uncomfortable. It's where you push yourself to actually utter the truths that even you perhaps didn't realize. I'm speak for myself. there are some truths in this book that I didn't think I didn't realize I knew, and they only sort of surfaced as I was writing.
Well, and I must say, while I was reading it, it was actually quite emotional for me reading it.
Oh,
That it really touched. It was quite confrontational because you're asking us to reflect on certain things and even drawing like this whole life journey and of the important moments in your life and how they've shaped you. We don't really often take time to reflect like that. So on one hand, I really, really enjoyed the book, right? And super touching and a lot of nuggets of like wisdom, and on the other hand I was like, oh, do I really want to read again tonight, because I'm going to be confronted with some of these questions that really get me to think and reflect. So very powerful. So I know you're very purpose driven and you write very intentional, so what would you like your readers, right, people that read your book, to walk away with? If it was one thing, what would that be for you? Or two or three, but to keep it simple.
I am so touched by your reflection because A, I know it's not easy, and B, I'm sorry if it made for hard work, because that while I know that's part of the thing, um it's generous of you to give me that time. I recognize people's time is precious. Um, if there was one thing I would want people to do, is the backstory here is that I didn't, this is going to sound very judgmental, so filter it in the way in which you wish to hear it, but I didn't think the world needed another leadership book. I feel like there are enough of them and they're amazing, and you don't need to hear from another person telling you how to lead. You don't need another hack of how to be more effective, more productive, more strong, more standing in your truth. But what I did feel like I needed is an understanding of how to access the things that were my strengths, my um, superpowers, if you will, although I know that's a overused term. Basically, the things that I can bring to this world today. And that's what I hope people will find in these pages, is a hopeful journey towards the things that make you you. And then you can choose whether you want to share those or not. It's completely up to you. I'm not offering you, I'm hoping not to offer you advice. Instead, I'm just offering you a handbook that you can maybe work through, and what emerges will be your own to hold, and then yours to share if you so choose to do so.
Yeah, and I love that, Arch, and I think that's also why when it comes to like Ginger and the work that we do is very aligned to that, right? It's not about becoming a perfect public speaker and this is what it looks like, but really reaching in and really understanding what are your qualities and strengths, and then show up
100%.
from that space. You mentioned this in the book around reach in, reset, reach out,
Yes.
which maybe you can share a little bit with all of us what that is, that concept. And then also I'd love to hear from you, like, what have you seen that leaders are struggling with the most?
So the concept emerged from something I tried with our team here at work during the pandemic. So we were dispersed, obviously, in lots of different locations, locked down, and you could sort of see the anxiety building and the stress and the fatigue of having to manage all of these emotions and all of these constraints placed on folks, whether it was in their nuclear families or their wider groups and circles of influence. And so I started a newsletter as a bit of a test and kind of a trial, and I called it Above the Bottom Line, because I intentionally wanted to talk about the things that are not financially necessarily measured, but really important to everyone's well-being and the ways in which they show up at work. And I had 3 points that I linked together with one, it turns out, through line every single month. And that was reach in, look inward to determine how this concept applies to you. Reset, recalibrate your thinking. Has it challenged anything? Do you need to rethink anything? Has anything been knocked out in terms of your mental model? And then reach out, connect with one other person and share what you've learned. And it was very simple, very sort of practical based. And the tenor of our interactions shifted. And I felt like that framework was something that I could offer here, as a way to think about your own path, as you walk this road, whatever that road might be. And then the second part of the question is, so what do I think leaders need? I think, I'm sorry, it's not going to be an easy or a simple answer. My view is that everyone needs something slightly different. And while there are common themes, of course, navigating uncertainty, knowing how to balance employee commitment with business objectives, for example, or understanding an increase in employee voice and balancing that with metrics that you have to sort of abide by if you have shareholders, for example. I think at our core, we can only do the best we can do when we really, really understand who we are and combine that with what the business needs from us and kind of find the balance between the two. What's the best way to effectively meet both of those constraints in the most tenable way for everyone concerned? Because I think we have to be realistic. If you work in a for-profit organization, there are some bottom line things that you need to think about. You can't just ignore them. But this toolkit can maybe help navigate them in a way that feels centered to you.
So actually, just a question that popped up is like some of these, books are also very kind of action driven of like, hey, these are now the steps that you can take to get better. Do you have any plans on like any kind of trainings or, individual or on team level, or this is it for now?
This is it for now. Thank you. I'm good. I think I want to just rest a bit, and maybe reset and take my own advice, take my foot off the gas. I'm really interested in of course somehow sharing what I've discovered, uncovered, whatever the word might be, but there's no intention to use it for any purpose really other than just to share what I've found useful. And I really mean that. It might sound cheesy or contrived, but I'm not searching for, to monetize this idea. Like it's just, that's not on my agenda. It's truly just something that I wish someone had told me when I started out, because I think I would have avoided some of the twists and turns that came along the way.
I feel it's a gift, and I showed earlier that it's not a very big or thick book, but what really comes through is there's a lot of research that's gone into it and a lot of storytelling. So you have a lot of examples, you bring metaphors, you talk about the empty chair concept, right? Like you've really brought in so many super important messages. Share a little bit about that. Like, what was that process like? How did you? I was constantly thinking, like, where do you get all this information? Like, it wasn't ChatGPT that just handed it to you, right? Like, what was
I
that
wish,
like?
I wish. I'm thinking I missed a boat because all I keep reading is about how chat does everything for you now. So I missed a trick. But I love to read, and it wasn't always true. As a kid, I was actually not a reader at all. In fact, much to my mother's dismay, I never picked up a book and I never did any work. So I just sort of skated by the skin of my teeth, and I was quite lucky. But during lockdown, I had all this time, I suppose, figure of speech, but I had more time than I've ever had. And I started reading a lot more. And I discovered something quite magical about it, both in terms of the apertures that it can open up for you when you really explore ideas or concepts that you've never seen before, but also the power of storytelling. And I think I somehow knew that. And Ginger was instrumental, I have to say it, in getting me to pay attention to the power of storytelling. And I think that's something you guys do incredibly well, is remind us that storytelling is what connects us. It's what brings people on the journey. It's what, gets our neurons firing in the same direction. And so I really tried to harness that. Now, I think I might have overdone it. There are parts where there's probably too many stories, but I really, every time I saw a nugget, I would write it down. And actually, it's one of the exercises in the book that I talk about whenever you see a really great idea, write it down. I think you never know when it's going to come in handy. You never know when it's going to link to a conversation you're having. And so I have this book of inklings that I keep wherever I go, and I just write stuff down, or I put it in my phone, or whatever way you have of capturing that. I think it has a lot of power. There's a reason why the greatest writers in the world have a lot of musings along the way. They iterate through. They don't always have the right answer, but they just sort of, when they see something, it's about noticing. I think that's what I'm trying to get to here, is it's just noticing the world around me in a way that I had never noticed it before. And that unlocked wonder for me. And I was like, I need to share that one. That's a good one. That's a keeper. Yeah.
That was actually a follow-up question for me, is like this kind of prerequisite, right? To have awareness in every moment, to be present, to be aware, right? If you reach in, to be kind of aware what is happening within yourself and what your values are and how you show up in every moment. So how are you able to keep that? And maybe not all the time, right? It's impossible, but do you have certain tips or tricks on how to keep that awareness the best way possible?
I am, those that know me know that I'm a volatile human being. So I have strong emotions, and I don't tend to hide them very well. It shows on my face quite quickly if I'm disappointed or happy or sad. I've always been that way, quite transparent. That being said, over the last decade or so, I've been working really hard to get more centered in the way in which I show up, because I recognize that emotions are contagious, and that as a member of the senior staff here, I can't always just wear my emotions on my sleeve, because it doesn't help those around me necessarily. The way I try to do it is I try to channel my mother. So I grew up in quite a spiritual home. My mother was incredibly, I'd say she was a bit of a front runner in this whole mindfulness movement, and she always knew meditation was important. So we grew up with that in the home. It was spend some time, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, just going inward. And so I have to admit that that was always part of who I was. I just hadn't accessed it in the same way till I started writing. And my only advice is find your way to get into the present. It'll be different again for everyone. For me, it's meditation. And some weeks it works really well, and other weeks it just doesn't. But it can be a walk, right? It can be listening to music. It can be reading a book. It can be, for some of us, watching a film, although I caveat that with not when there's 6 screens happening at the same time, which I see my teenage daughter doing. But whatever way you can disconnect, I think it's important. And it's really useful, because I think we see disconnection in the sense of reaching in as unproductive time. But I believe that in some ways it is incredibly productive, because it is your way of getting back in touch with who you are. And what could be more important than that?
Also, really, this difference between constantly doing and being, right? So just be in moments, and to accept that we don't always have to do. We're such a busy
Hard lesson.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think, for me, for example, also, like, I'm a big meditator, so it definitely helps to just slow things down and become more aware. But also simple sticky notes. Like on my screen, I used to have a big, a sticky note that would say, "Be here now, listen
Oh, that's
attentively."
good.
And just little things like that, just to remember to bring us back to where we are, and with who we are, to really connect. Your through line, because probably, if you count the amount of times that we see through line as the word in your book, is a lot. So I think that's really the main theme, and also the topic of your book. How does understanding your through line for you helps you in your day-to-day and as a leader, and how does it show up?
The first thing is that it helps me sense check if the behaviors that are coming across are in line with who I believe I am. I find that whenever I deviate from the core of who I am, I feel discomfort. And when I feel discomfort, it creates a natural sort of metabolic feeling of heat rising in my face, a bit of sweatiness, not quite sure what's going on. Now, just because I feel discomfort, I should say, doesn't mean that the behavior is wrong, because sometimes it can point to something different, like I need to learn something, or there's a challenge that's requiring more focus, or whatever it might be. But the through line has helped guide me in the sense of when I need to return to it, because I know what it is. When I feel discomfort, and it's discomfort because I'm straying away from that through line, I can recalibrate because I know where to get to. It's a bit like the metaphor that I use about the compass. The compass always points true north, right? And knowing that true north is really helpful when you're trying to get from point A to point B. Similarly, in our careers, we can sort of start in one place and think we're going to a different one. But if we don't know how to get there, or we don't know the direction of travel, we can lose our way along the way. And I see someone's put something in the chat about the quote, to lose your way is to learn the way. And I think that's really true. Like sometimes you do have to deviate because that's how you learn. That discomfort and that constraint unlocks new potential and new avenues. But I do think having a center point can make everything feel a little bit easier. I think that's how I would put it.
I mean, the world around us is changing so quickly,
So
right?
fast.
And to find that anchor or that compass really helps navigate and stay centered. I think you mentioned that as well.
Yeah.
If there is like one exercise, maybe, you know, most of you probably here, listeners, haven't read the book yet. But what would then be one exercise that you would say is a really good one to share with all of us to do in a busy day?
So I think my favorite is the 6-word memoir, and I can't take credit for it. It was started, well, actually, legend has it Hemingway was the first person to use it. When he had lunch with a bunch of friends, and he bet them that he could write a story in 6 words. And of course, once they put their money down, he wrote a story in 6 words. And I believe it was for sale, baby shoes, never worn. And his friends basically lost the bet. Larry Smith, who founded Smith Magazine, which was a long form creative magazine, decided that he wanted to launch that idea to his network, and it's taken off ever since. So there are best-selling books, there's been TED Talks about it, schools use it, and workplaces have used it, and we've used it here on my team just to get people energized and pumped up. I think it's a wonderful way to access your through line. So have a think about, if you had to pick a through line, and you can have many, and you had to describe it in 6 words, what would it be? The theory is that constraints can sometimes enhance creativity. So by limiting your word count, you're forced to figure out what really matters to you. And I found that really powerful. So I would share that one.
Thank you. So we get to put to work a little bit too. I also want to invite everyone here, ask if you have any questions for Arch. This is the chance. You can put that in the chat or just come off mute, raise your hand. We'll keep going. Dana, I see your hand. Please go ahead.
I don't have a question. Hi, everybody. Arch, I love listening to you. I just want to say, as a leadership coach myself, I'm listening to you. You could be doing leadership coaching. I mean, the themes that I'm hearing from you around managing polarities and balancing parts and lead from any chair and reframe beliefs and vision through storytelling and finding your own way and the somatic check-ins. I mean, I guess there is a question, is how did you come to all of this? Did you just stumble upon all of this brilliance by doing? Is it because you're reading so much? Is it just naturally part of who you are? Because not everybody on the street knows this stuff. Not every leader knows this.
Thank you, Dana. That's super generous and very kind of you. Means a lot as well, given our conversation. Um, I don't, I don't know. I don't know. I wish I knew. I think it's a combination of the genius of others. I think there's this kind of idea in my head that you unlock something by reading and listening to other people. And often the most amazing nuggets you just sort of stumble upon. And I wish it was formulaic, like I could say I did A and then I did B and that led to C. But in my life, anyway, in my experience, it is that isn't how it's happened. It's been a series of circumstances that have led to this point. And so what you'll see in the book is that actually nothing I'm saying is new news. It really isn't. But all I'm doing is I'm connecting it to an experience that gives it perhaps thematically a bit of flow, um, and hopefully some useful constructs that you can take into your daily life. That's what I'm hoping. But the genius is collective. I think we are in this world today, in this time, which can feel quite volatile and uncertain and maybe a little anxiety producing. But we are also in a time, and this is this incredible dichotomy that we live in, where there is so much hope and so much power in this collective genius. And we mustn't forget that. And that's what I want. I really hope that this book does.
If I can just say one last thing, I think one of your superpowers is your noticing. It's just you go through life with your eyes open. And so you are capturing all these nuggets and then, like, through your generosity saying, okay, and here, now I'm going to share it with other people. But it just sounds like it's the fact that you're paying attention. So thank you for
I would say then that's really like, I feel the same with this book. It's like she's sharing all of the things, or maybe not all, but like a lot of the things that you've gathered, like the insight, the examples, the metaphors, the stories that you've gathered through many, many years. And you're sharing that with us as a gift for us then, again, to be able to pass on and inspire other people as well. So
Very touched. Thank you.
how do you use the through line in your day-to-day leadership? So you have a team of people. Share a little bit about how do you manage them? How do you work with them? Do you ask them reflective questions? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, they make fun of me a lot because they call me the queen of cheese, and it wouldn't be untrue. And that being said, I'm working really hard to get more. So one of the things I've found easier has been being around people, leading people, working with people, setting direction. That has felt lighter to me. What I find very challenging is having the difficult conversations, setting boundaries, knowing the difference between caring and carrying, and really trying to implement that in the workplace. And I'm still working on it. I have gotten better at, I think, of course, how can I judge? You'd need to ask someone I work with, but I feel like I've gotten better at being clearer as a result of this work with the through line, because I feel very anchored and I know where the business is trying to go. We have one mission, and that is to protect and grow our clients' capital. And that is always the central point from which we do our work. So if we do work that doesn't support that initiative, I feel like we shouldn't be doing it. And that is what weeds out the sort of the non-essential from the really core. I'm trying to get better at stating it when I see it. So it's really interesting that Dana says, I notice stuff. Yes, I notice stuff in the world around me, but I'm not always willing to speak up about it. And this book was an effort to try to do that more proactively.
And I can see that people who read it then also will keep you accountable, right? If you
Yeah.
words that you speak and put a really
For
high
sure.
bar for yourself, that you want to exemplify those as well. One concept that stood out that I remember was this empty chair concept. Is that something you use? And maybe share a little bit about what that empty chair concept is, because I think it's brilliant.
Well, again, this goes back to this point about collective genius. So I think it was started at Sears, and it was this idea that they would have team meetings and they would always keep one chair empty. The idea is now the concept is now used at companies like Amazon and many others. And the client is represented by that chair. The idea that, for example, that in a conversation about whatever it might be that you're having the conversation about, you always keep in mind that key stakeholder who isn't physically present, but who's represented by that chair. And I think it keeps you honest and true to your purpose and your through line. And it's just quite a nice visual way of doing things. So we've talked about it internally here. Our meeting rooms are kind of small, so there's not often an empty chair in sight, but it is there metaphorically. We're constantly thinking about the person who would have a voice if they were here, but aren't actually.
That's great. And I think we were able to, and very honored to have a bit of this journey with you, right? When you attended the Leader's Voice and you went through that program, and that we heard you speak after. So you share a little bit about how that's also shaped the clarity and the reflection and you, who you are.
That is the most, and I don't say this lightly, one of the most transformative experiences of my career. In 2019, I met Sarah Lloyd-Hughes, who is Carlinde's partner here in the UK, and she talked to me about the Leader's Voice, which was a year-long, or I think at the time it was 8-month program for leaders who were trying to clarify their vision and their strategy and find a way to communicate what they had to communicate. That happened right before COVID. So the program extended to an 18-month one and went virtual instead of in person. It transformed my thinking on what leadership should look like, how messages need to be communicated, and the power of simplicity to cut through all the noise. And it was such a, yeah, it was such a gift to be able to attend that program for that 18-month period.
And I think we have your story on a video on our site as well.
No, yeah.
Anyone who wants to listen to beautiful storytelling by Arch, we can share the link. I think you've shown also today, but every time I speak to you, you're such a storyteller, which is one of such important qualities of a leader, right? Because it makes people and yeah, and also, like you said, emotionally resonate and move people because it touches us. Is there a story that you'd like to share here? I think you already shared one with Diane when we had a pre-call a while ago around this restaurant that we all need to visit in London.
Oh my goodness,
If you want to share that one, or if
I don't know. I think I've promised Diane a meal when she comes this side of the pond. So those of you who live in London will have been, or if you haven't, you should go to a restaurant called Hoppers in Soho. Hoppers, for those of you who don't know, are they're sort of they're pancakes, are sort of soft and fluffy in the middle and crispy on the outside. And they're often combined with fiery, spicy curries. And they're eaten in the south of India and in Sri Lanka as well. And one of the stories in the book is a story of a professor from Columbia Business School, and he recounts this tale of how one night he's in London, so he lives in New York, but he's in London for a meeting, and he's having dinner at Hopper's, its favorite restaurant in London. He's enjoying his meal, and at about 9:30, the wait staff come out of the kitchen and they say, 5 minutes, the kitchen is closing, last orders, please. So he thinks, okay, I would love another Hopper. So he orders one, and he notices that the table next to him are deeply engaged in a conversation and they ignore the wait staff. 10 minutes later, the gentleman calls the waiter over and says, can I have another Hopper? And so the waiter says, no, I'm sorry, sir, the kitchen is closed. He's like, okay, can I have some rice? And he's like, no, I'm sorry, sir, the kitchen is closed. So the professor thinks to himself, man, I am so good. I listened to the wait staff. I ordered my Hopper. I'm so much better than this other guy who didn't listen. And then a sort of kinder part of him reflects on, well, how many times did you ignore messages about where you should be or what you should do? So he decides to be the son that his mother has raised and leans over and offers this neighbor his Hopper. And the neighbor says, no, thank you very much. And he graciously turns it down. And so Professor Wadwa just continues with his meal. And then he gets up to pay. And when he gets up to pay, the waitstaff tell him, no, the gentleman paid your bill. And in that moment, he reflects that person who he had judged in that way did an act, just offered an act of generosity with no hope of recompense. I mean, he'd walked out into the night. The guy was never going to see him again. And Professor Wadwa, had judged. He had said, oh, what an idiot, what a fool. He didn't pay attention to the wait staff. But in that moment, he realized you need to have inner mastery in order to have outer impact. And that's what that gentleman had demonstrated. And that line just really clarifies for me what a through line can do. If you really understand yourself, you have the power to change the impact you have on others. And I just think, well, A, go to Hoppers and eat a Hopper because it's amazing. But B, it's just such a lovely story of human kindness and what that can look like when you let it be there for you.
It's also a beautiful example how you are able to go to the core of that message and also connect it to leadership, right? Which you do actually constantly. You constantly bring these examples and these stories from your life into the context of leadership. How can we become better leaders? The importance of exemplifying all of that. So super powerful. Thank you for sharing that. Diane, I think you have a question. I saw your hand up.
I do, yes, thank you. Quorum is all about taking action, and I've had so many conversations with our members recently, especially with all the change in the US and around the globe since the election. I know Tara Junta and I and Marcia Henderson have talked about this is overwhelming. Where do we begin? And Arch, in your book, you talk a lot about if you don't, who will, right? And it's a message that's talking about how important it is for all of us to step up and take action right now. So how would you suggest, just from your book, how to utilize your concept of through lines to create critical change right now? And just a side note, the great thing about the book is that Arch gives us exercises to really build on these suggestions that she has. So if I can hand that to you, Arch.
It's I think that's the $1 million question. How do we do something in this time? I mean, I'm gonna take the easy way out and say I actually don't know if I do know. I wish someone would tell me, actually. That's kind of where I sit. I know something has to happen. I just don't know how. But I know one thing, and that is that if we can answer that question in the affirmative, i.e., if you don't, who will? Well, I will, then something shifts. And it doesn't have to be necessarily adapted. Like, I don't think it's about numbers. I think it's about individual responsibility first, and then it can expand to collective responsibility. But it takes each of us to do one thing. And what that one thing is, I don't know yet, but I think it's creating time for spaces like this, for example, is a great example of positive action. By coming together and talking about new ideas or ways in which to better understand ourselves and each other, we can do better work because we're empowered. The bucket gets filled up. So this is a great example, actually, of organizing and coming together as a community. There are lots of others. There is so much good work happening around the US and around the world at this present time. And I suppose you're asking, how do you organize? How do you come together to do more, either more quickly or more forcefully? It will emerge. I'm sure of it. I know it. America is a land of opportunity. For me, it gave me the opportunity to expand beyond my wildest dreams. And I know it will do that for so many. Again, it just has to. Like, it can't. This is not over.
And I appreciate your idea too of when it's so overwhelming, all of, where do you begin? And like Tara and I are just like, okay, you start small, you find what's most important to you. We can't do it all, so start somewhere, start anywhere, locally. What topic is most important to you? What cause, what initiative? And with what you talk about in your book, Art, saying, okay, stop and re-look at what your through lines are, what are really important to you, take new things that you've learned to readjust the through lines, and then taking those to be more powerful as a leader and making change. That's one of the things I loved about the book and exercises.
And it reminds me actually, Art, of the book. Oh, Tyra, you have a question? Maybe just to finish my thought, because we chatted about this similar topic as well, that if we are not clear about our values, right, and we reach in and have an understanding of what our standpoint there and our perspectives and ideas are, then our world around us change very quickly, and then suddenly we don't really know where that line in the sand is, because things become our new normal. So actually, the more clear we are and anchored we are, then we also suddenly see like, wait, things around us start shifting so far away from my values and from how I want to see things and what I stand for, that we actually can speak up and that we can make a difference and a change, because world is changing so quickly.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah,
Tara.
and this is Tara. Thank you. And you addressed it in part, Carlinde. And just building on what Diane said, I think, and I haven't had the opportunity yet to read your book, Arch, so I look forward to it. So,
Thank you.
but the role of courage in leadership, and if I would observe one failure, not everywhere, but in many places in leadership, at least in the United States, it's a failure of courage. And I can see the role of understanding your through line and giving you that clarity, like Carlinde was talking about, in terms of your values and what's important to you and what do you stand for. So maybe that's where kind of the concept of courage comes in. I don't know. I just wanted to ask on your thoughts about that.
It's so incredible that you're bringing this question into the room, because so one of the things I've discovered in the last 3 years are podcasts. Like, I'm devouring them. Every morning I listen to a different one on my commute into town. And this morning I listened to We Can Do Hard Things, with Glennon Doyle and her partner. And they were interviewing Bishop Marianne Buddy, who those of you in the US will know is the bishop who gave the sermon during the inauguration. And I encourage you to listen to it if that's of interest. But basically, she's written a book called How to Be Brave. And the reason I bring that up is because of this question that you pose, which I think is really topical, on how do you find courage? I think effectively bravery and courage are very much linked. And she goes on to explain, and I found it very interesting. She talked about it as staying in her lane. So she's very centered. She knows what her lane is, and she knows the lane from which she operates. And whenever she has to do something scary, she reflects on, is this in my lane or is this in someone else's lane? And in a way, I sort of smiled to myself and I thought, it's kind of an extrapolation of the through line. Like, once you understand your lane or your through line or whatever metaphor you choose to call it, you understand where the work you need to do has to start from. And it is from that place that you can muster the courage. She described it as standing on a diving board. You only have two choices. You either have to climb back down the steps from which you the steps from which you came, or you've got to jump off the diving board. And as she was standing in front of the president at his inauguration, she realized she needed to jump. And so she did. In 1 minute and 30 seconds, she made some statements which got people's attention. Was it from her lane? Absolutely. Did she receive lots of feedback, positive and negative? Absolutely. But she stayed true to her lane. And I guess what I'm saying in a long-winded way is knowing your lane is the best spot from which to uncover the courage that is already there.
Thank you.
Maybe to stay with the C's, you also speak or write actually quite a bit about care and the importance of care. Can you share a little bit more where that comes from and what your ideas are around that and how we can implement that?
Sure. I mean, I started as a teacher working with neurodiverse kids and with from very young children all the way up to graduating seniors. And one of the things that's true in the schools I worked in was that care was very fundamental to the learning process. We noticed that when we taught with care, kids did better. I mean, that probably isn't rocket science, but it was something that was really fundamental to the classroom. What I noticed when I entered finance was the opposite of that. We don't often talk about care in the for-profit workspace. And I sort of wondered about that. In fact, in finance, one of the main premises of the regulator here in the UK is firms have a duty of care to their clients. And I always wondered why that choice of language? Why duty of care? Why not duty to care? Like, why have they done that? And so I went on a little bit of a rabbit hole adventure with this. And I believe that actually, when you create workspaces where caring is the norm, where caring is actually a metric that people are evaluated on, and it can show up as helpfulness, kindness, empathy, compassion. I mean, there's a whole scale of what care can show up as. You actually get a different result from the people you work with. And in many cases, that result is significantly stronger than what you would have gotten without it. And that's my experience, but I guess the ways to, and I offer a little mnemonic to help people think about care in the workplace. So care, if spelled out, and I know it's cheesy marketing spin, but I couldn't help myself. C for connection, A for attention, R for refraction, and E for expansion. So connection should be probably self-explanatory to all of you. We are wired for it. We need it. We always need to think about others when we're thinking about leadership. Attention, this is a lot harder for me. It's knowing when to shut up and listen and remembering you have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Refraction, the way we use language. So refraction is the scientific concept of when light hits a barrier of some kind, it changes direction. As leaders, I think we have language that we can do the same with. We can shift from conflict to resolution. We can shift from clarity to ambiguity or vice versa. So using our toolkit to shift the debate. And then finally, expansion. What's better than making, growing the pie? So not seeing things as binary, but seeing things as expansive, hopeful, optimistic. So yeah, I think care is really important.
Beautiful. Yes. And I think we're close to the end. So I want to make sure that if anyone has any other questions, because I can keep going, like time flies by. I tap into this curiosity and I can keep asking you questions. Maybe I'll throw a couple more out and then we close it up. Writing a book, I can imagine, has also a big impact on the people around you. So I'm curious, like, how did the people around you respond, either after reading it or just guiding you through this process or just being there for you while you're going through it? Like, what were some comments and experiences you have?
I have never been very good at receiving love. You and I chatted about this offline, but I believe I give love quite easily, but receiving is a lot scarier for me. I have never experienced this level of support and love from my immediate circle at any other. I mean, I'm sure I have. I just haven't accepted it. This time around, I accepted it. It's been absolutely amazing to witness and to be part of that circle. And I feel incredibly lucky, incredibly lucky. Apparently, the word humble is being overused at the moment. I saw a LinkedIn post that said, if I see one more post about being humble, being grateful, so I can't use the word anymore now. But I am really touched by by the support. And I, especially to, you know, my daughter, for example, my husband, and my extended family and friends, they've sort of put up with all the shenanigans that come with focusing on a book.
So
And
you mentioned that you were going to take a little break and just
yeah,
relax. Although it's hard to believe somehow that you're not gonna still make notes and be inspired about the world around you. Do you have a plan of what's next? Like, are you already thinking about more or next book or movie or all of that?
no, no movie. I'll play one on. No, I'm not. No next book at this point. I just want to let it settle and not and just sort of see what emerges. I'm hoping something new and exciting is around the corner. I want to spend a bit of time with just being in the moment. So
Well, I want to thank you. I think for me it was really, really touching to be
been
here together
so
with you.
lovely.
Felt like we were in the same room with all of you, actually, with 19 or 18 of us. Yeah, I feel like you've really given a gift, not just with your book, but also now with sharing, you know, your insights and your experiences, and really, yeah, I'm really thankful, and I feel like it's the start of many more either interactions or TED Talks or whatever it's gonna be in, but it feels like you have too much to share, not to share with the world around. So thank you so much for this.
Thank you, Carlin, and thank
And
you all for taking the time. It means a lot.
yeah, and I think Meg, you maybe want to share a couple more things.
Oh, yeah, well, first of all, I want a huge thanks to Arch and Carlinde for this conversation, which has been so amazing. We're so appreciative of your time, Arch, and Carlinde, for all the framing that you did for us, which was amazing. And if we were all together, there would be lots of hugs and big round of applause for sure, just so you know. So we'll do that virtually. That's all coming your way. I hope you feel it from this group. Um, if I was gonna sum up all the millions of things that I heard, and I took like copious notes and loved every minute of the conversation. So just so you know, um, it was your willingness as a leader to actually touch on the things that people tend not to talk about ever, which actually make the difference between a good leader and a great leader, in my mind. And that was some of the things that are considered somewhat soft, potentially, or the emotional element of leadership. And in fact, I think, as any of us have experienced throughout our lives, the very, very best of leaders are those that are willing to be vulnerable, open their soul, consider, reflect on themselves in a very deep way, because it comes out in the way that they then engage with everybody else. And so all of that is just so incredibly powerful. So thank you for not only being who you are, but being willing to share that with all of us, because it's so incredibly rich. So I loved the notion of writing down the good idea. When I was leading in the corporate world, one of the things I was passionate about was how you innovate all the time, or how you constantly look for that. And the funny thing is when you get these little moments, that's when you get inspired, because you've changed your routine or something else happens or whatever. And that's where the kernel of a notion comes. And it's so powerful to remind us all, to make sure you write that down or you touch on it, because you don't know when that can be useful to you. And that's just brilliant. So thank you for that, for sharing that brilliance, and framing it in your way, which I think was really useful. I think we're going to end today with the one real big call to action that Arch set up for us, which is the I will. I just absolutely loved that. I love that. Um, if you don't, who will? And the answer is I will. And I'd like to challenge all of us to leave today with that notion in mind. What is the I will that we're going to do? And we're going to take forward and kind of commit to, and even share with each other here afterwards, what it is that we want to focus on. It's so brilliant and it's so meaningful. And I'm a big fan of small steps that have big impacts. So It doesn't have to, don't bite off more than you can chew. Make it really simple, because that's what's going to end up resonating, so that's what I'm going to challenge us as our big action. Arch, we never leave a meeting at Quorum without an action item. So that's what Diane was pushing for earlier, and you so brilliantly set up. So love that. I'm also going to challenge everybody to actually buy the book, because it sounds like we would all really enjoy it. So how about that as our next challenge? And then the last thing I would say is we have a retreat coming up in 10 days, I think. We're in the countdown. So if by chance you can still make it and join us, we're going to all be up in Narrowsburg, New York, reflecting and enjoying each other's company. So we look forward to that. And then I'm going to end with just a massive thank you to Arch and Carlinde again, and Diane for connecting all of us to this concept and making it happen. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And so lovely to see everybody. I hope you have a great rest of your week. We look forward to connecting soon.
And I'm going to add something just quickly. Thank you. Thank you. I'm just so inspired. Check out Arch's book. Once you read it, leave a review, because I know you'll love it. And this is how we
True.
support each other as women and leaders. Check out the work they're doing at Ginger Leadership Communications too. I just am awe of the powerful tools and the way that you help support us through the work you're doing, Carlinda. So thank you all. This has been amazing. So I look forward to seeing you all again soon.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.